Hi, I'm Noma Langam Sally Moses, founder of Healthy Black Woman, and I'm also an editor at Your Black World, the hottest news site online. I'm here today with Demario Solomon Simmons. Hi, Demario, how are you?
Hey, Nomalanga, how you doing? It's good to see you and good to be talking
I'm
to you.
I'm doing great, thank you. Great to see you too. If you could you just give us a quick description, or rather, a quick introduction of who you are?
Oh, sure. I'm Demario Solomon Simmons. I'm an attorney based here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I'm a practicing attorney about 10 years, and been following this case in St. Louis, outside of St. Louis, Ferguson, Missouri. And so I'm excited to be here to talk to you about some of the legal issues and ramifications that have been coming over the last 6 days.
Absolutely. So let's just jump right in.
Sure.
The topic today is what's happening in Ferguson, Missouri. Let's assume that somebody's been living under a rock and doesn't know what is going on. Can you give us a quick background on what is going on in Ferguson, Missouri?
Sure, no problem. This past Saturday, a young man by the name of Michael Brown, his friend, was walking home to Michael Brown's grandmother's home. Was walking without causing any problems. A Ferguson police officer rode up on Mr. Brown and his friend Dorian Johnson, asked him to get out the street. At that point, some type of verbal words were stated, and then a physical altercation, according to what the witnesses are stating, occurred. What witnesses are saying, they saw the police officer actually grab Michael Brown and try to pull him into the car. Michael Brown was resisting. The police officer then shot a one gunshot while he was in the car. Mr. Brown broke away and ran away from the officer. The officer gets out of his car, and Mr. Brown's about 35 feet away, and the officer shoots at him. He hits Mr. Brown, who then stops, turns around, puts his hands up, and say, "Don't shoot, I'm unarmed." And the officer runs up on Mr. Brown and shoots him 4 to 6 additional times and kills him right in the middle of the street, right in the middle of broad daylight. Mr. Brown's body laid in the street for about 4 hours. Obviously, you can imagine the community is outraged when something like that occurs. The police department did not immediately release and had not released until today what actually occurred and who actually shot Mr. Brown. And because of that, the community, as you can imagine, was wanting answers. And so they were gathering at different places, holding very peaceful protests. And in response to these peaceful protests, the Ferguson Police Department and the St. Louis County Police Department and other agencies came in with overwhelming militarized force, using tear gas, rubber bullets, beating people, falsely arresting people, violating the civil rights of people's ability to rightfully, peacefully assemble, violating the civil rights of the freedom of press, and just continually wreaking havoc. But the issue is that this issue is bigger than Ferguson, but the main objective here is to get justice for Mike Brown.
I agree with you that this is not just about what's happening in Ferguson, because we are seeing a trend of this happening. There are, however, updates about what's happening with this case, and I know you've been following it very closely, as have most of us, especially those of us who are mothers of young boys, and you have to wonder what's going on in this country.
Right.
So can you give us basically an update? I know there was a pivotal moment this morning where there was an interview with the police chief, and then he did another interview this afternoon. So can you just update us on what has happened so far?
Sure. I mean, it's been an unbelievable, extraordinary day. When this morning, after 6 days, finally the police chief, under the pressure of the governor of Missouri, Jay Nixon, and others, decided he was going to release the name of the officer who shot Michael Brown, and also information leading up to the up to the shooting. But in fact, what he did this morning, he discussed and talked more about an alleged robbery that Michael Brown was allegedly supposed to have committed minutes before being shot. They also released documentation, pictures, and video surveillance that purportedly showed Michael Brown as the robber minutes before being shot. And at the end of that press conference, which was a big, huge bombshell, obviously, to say that this guy was a robber and a thug and a criminal, he released the name of the actual officer, Darren Wilson, who actually shot Michael Brown. People were outraged, including myself, because why would they release this information and the speculation that Michael Brown was robbing this convenience store, as if this was the reason why he is justified to shoot an unarmed teenager in the middle of the street during the broad daylight. But in a twist of fate, the police chief just 15, 20 minutes ago gave another press conference where he admitted to the world that the officer who shot Michael Brown in the back and 46 times, killing him, did not have any idea, any knowledge at all that Michael Brown was a suspect in a robbery. So it just blew away this reasoning, and it really just exposed that this Ferguson Police Department is very unprofessional. They're not trained, and they certainly are not trustworthy if they would try to come out and slander the name of this young, innocent, unarmed boy to say he was doing something wrong, and that was justification for him to be shot, and then have to come out just a few minutes later and be exposed to the world that they were really just not connected at all. It's really, truly shameful, but I'm very happy that it occurred because it really rips the cover off of this big things that have been happening in this country for a very long time.
Right. So sticking to this case, what I can see is, in short, a young black man was killed. Then they tried to say that the reason that he was killed was because the police were looking for him because he robbed a convenience store. Then, unfortunately for them, we then hear that he was the officer that shot him didn't know he had robbed the convenience store. So now we still can say that the shooting was not related to the robbery.
Right. And I want to make this point real clear. You're right. The shooting was not related to the robbery. But I'll make this point real clear. The issue is the legal justification to use deadly force. And this is important because this happens so often in communities all across this nation. It happens right here in Tulsa. There's an unarmed black man that got shot in L.A. just a few days ago. We saw Eric Garner in New York City being choked to death. The Supreme Court is very clear in the case Tennessee versus Gardner, very, very clear that lethal force can only be used in two instances. And one, if the police officer's life is in imminent danger or the life of a third party is in imminent danger. That's the first scenario. That was not here, obviously. And secondly, if the person fleeing the police officer or running from the police officer is a known, dangerous, violent felon. That was not the case here. Everyone that talks about Michael Brown talks about him being a very nice person, was not a violent person. And even if he was a violent person, the moment that he was shot and he turned around, he had his hands up and he said, "I'm unarmed, don't shoot." Any perceived threat was over at that time. And for that officer to shoot him 46 more times, that is nothing but cold-blooded murder in the first degree. And I hope he's charged, and I hope he gets his day in court very, very soon.
I completely agree. And, this may be a little bit off topic, but I still want to address it. We keep hearing over and over that this young man said, "I'm unarmed." He put his hands up. And this is basically something that not everybody does. You don't have to, when you see the police, throw your hands up and say, "I'm unarmed." But I think now we're living in a state where people are thinking if the cops are coming, there's a possibility that they'll shoot you. That's the first thing. Now, the second thing is, and you may not have the answer, but I'll ask the question anyway. What's a young black man to do now? If when you put your hands up and you say, "I am unarmed," what else could he possibly have done? I would say nothing. But I think the concern, I think I said this before, I'm a mother. I have a young boy. He's only 5, but he will eventually be a young black man out on the street.
Right.
So this is a grave concern, not just for me, but for everybody. And I just don't understand what we're supposed to do.
Right. That's a great question, Amalanka. And in fact, I did a video. If your viewers go to my YouTube page, Demario Solomon Simmons, I gave 5 quick tips that every mother, every father, every person who has or loves a young black male could watch, because there's some things that need to happen. Now, let me be very clear. My career as a lobbyist and as a lawyer, I'm always fighting for the rights of those who've been aggrieved. I'm suing people for civil rights violations, for discrimination, be it police departments, be it corporations. I've sued Native American nations for discriminating against black Native Americans. So policy-wise and professionally-wise, that's what I'm going to do and continue to do. But on the level that you're talking about, on the individual level, what do we need to do to protect our young men, to prepare them for the world that we live in? Unfortunately, we live in a world where young black men are still stigmatized, are considered to be dangerous just by walking around, just by breathing. So I think it's very important that we do tell our young men and advise them how they need to interact with the police officers. In this particular case, obviously I was not there, but it's 5 things that a couple of things I would say. Number one, if you have any police contact, period, at any time, keep your cool, do what they tell you to do as quickly as possible. Now, when I say as quickly as possible, let me make sure I'm being more clear. don't move real quickly. Don't make quick movements. Don't use your hands a lot because we know they will shoot you. They will beat you down. They will charge you with on a police officer after they beat you down. In fact, there was a case in Ferguson a few years ago where they beat down a black man and then charged him, beat down an innocent black man and then charged him with defacing their property because his blood got on their property, on their uniforms. Right. I mean, that's just ridiculous, right? So to your issue, I think number one, if you have a police encounter, teach your young man, your husband, your son, your brother, keep his cool. Do not argue back. Do not have quick movements. And do not run from the police. I mean, I'm talking about initial contact, right? In this situation, this had already escalated. He was running for his life. But in general, as a black man, just 2 months ago, I was actually racially profiled coming from Kansas City, Missouri, right? I was afraid. I had my wife with me. I was accused and asked, was I a drug dealer? Did I have large sums of cash? Did I have weapons? What was I doing in Missouri? Why was I going to Kansas City? I'm a lawyer. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I'm a contributor to society. I didn't deserve that. I was very upset. And I was very afraid of what could possibly happen. And I had to restrain myself and say yes or no, sir, to a person who was violating my civil rights. But it's what I had to do because at the end of the day, I wanted to get home. And I wanted to get back in the car with my wife and get home safely. So on a micro level with our young men, we have to equip them to say, this is a world that doesn't view you as a safe teenager or a safe young person. They view you as a threat, and you must do what you can at the time you have police contact. Yes sir, no sir, be cool. But at the same time, I urge all parents, all concerned citizens, get involved at the policy level. Get involved at your local elections. Make sure you're getting people registered to vote and vote. Make sure you're going to city council meetings. Make sure you're holding people accountable. Going to your state legislature, making sure you understand what's going on. Because we need a policy change. We need a policy change so young black men and black people in general are not looked at as commodities to be traded in the prison industrial complex. Not looked at as animals to be shot down in the middle of the street the way that Michael Brown was shot down. Not looked at as animals to bring out military equipment and guns and tear gas and be treated as they are some type of enemy combatants when they're U.S. citizens exercising their First Amendment right, not to be falsely imprisoned, not to be falsely arrested, not to have their right to peaceful assembly to be violated for the world to see. And I think it's very important, and it's a blessing in this great tragedy of Mike Brown being killed, that these issues are coming to light because we have to deal with them here in America or our country will not survive, and that's just the bottom line.
Right. I think you said something very key here is that as unfortunate as it is that this happened, the good thing that we can take from it is that a lot of light is being shed on a trend. It's not just about Michael Brown, although this is very serious and this is of great concern. It's about a trend and a pattern. I've been seeing some statistics. I think the last one that I saw said that a young black man is killed every 28 hours. So that's almost every day in this country. And most of them are being killed by law enforcement officers. So that's of great concern, and obviously something needs to change. I have no problem admitting I have selfish concerns about what about my son? I feel scared, as well I should because of the state of things. But just going forward, I'd like to hear your thoughts on what you think needs to happen. Let's take it back to Ferguson, Missouri from here on so that there can be some kind of resolution.
Yeah, I think a couple of things is happening. Number one, I hope that Ferguson, Missouri is tied up in litigation. They should be tied up in litigation for the next 10 years. I mean, there were so many gross violations of civil rights that I witnessed myself through social media and watching on CNN. People being beaten down, people being tear gassed in their own front yards or their own backyards, the destruction of property. So I hope a lot of lawsuits are going to be filed against Ferguson and the St. Louis County Police Department so they can understand that this type of behavior is not only is it un-American, it's unacceptable in any civilized society. That needs to occur and it needs to happen. And I hope that other lawyers like myself can be involved in helping in that litigation, helping to make sure that people that committed those violations are held accountable. That's number one. Number two, I think that the spotlight has to continue to be on like Ferguson, which has over 65% African-American population, yet they only have 3 black officers in their police department. That is not uncommon across this nation. So I think Ferguson is going to have, in Ferguson, they're going to have to address that problem firsthand. They're going to have to bring in diversity consultants to come in and teach them better training on how to be police officers and public servants. And they're not soldiers. They're not going into enemy territory, but they need to learn how to understand the culture of the people that they're policing. They need to understand how to get more people of that particular culture to be a part of the police force. And thirdly, we must make sure that we don't end this just in Ferguson. We must make sure that across this nation, people understand what actually pushed this issue forward. It was not the fact that people demonstrated by going down to City Hall one day and having a planned 6 to 7 p.m. demonstration and going home. These brave souls in Ferguson, I'm so proud of these people. These are everyday people, just regular Joes who decided we're not taking it anymore. And they did actual direct, non-violent civil disobedience. That is what has to happen when you have an injustice. And I'm so proud of them. I'm just so excited to know that those young people stood up and finally took back the cover of what was going on. Because no one was covering it outside of social media and a few local politicians and people on the ground there. And then finally the CNNs and MSNBCs got involved. But it was those young people taking direct action over a sustained period of time. And we're talking about day six, and they're still out there. And because of the pressure, the Ferguson Police Department and the police chief have been exposed as the untrustworthy organization that they are. And this Darren Wilson, I'm just looking forward to him next day in court. I believe when the facts come out in court, I believe he will be charged, and I believe he will be convicted of first-degree murder of a very promising young man, Mike Brown.
I'm not sure I believe he will be convicted, but I think that's what needs to happen. Because I can remember, this is a different case. I can remember with the Trayvon Martin case where we had the George Zimmerman who went after him and ended his life. I thought it was obvious that George Zimmerman was going to go to jail. And unfortunately he didn't. So I want to believe that, the justice system will not fail us, but I'm always watching and I'm always waiting to see what will happen. I'll let you get the last word about, what's going on in Ferguson, Missouri.
Well, the last word I think I want to say on a positive note, it took longer than it should have for the governor to get involved and larger elected officials, but I must really commend them bringing this Captain Ron Johnson from the state trooper who's been in charge over the last 24 to 36 hours. This brother who is from Ferguson is one of the most impressive individuals I've ever seen in the public square. He has been able to come in and connect to the community where he's from, get everybody calmed down enough to be able to peacefully assemble, get rid of this militarized police force, and bring some real stability and calm to the situation. He has shown himself to be not only a man among men, but a man of and for the people. And I think that's one of the best developments that occurred today. And I think because of his leadership and his service being there amongst the people, they was able to really get things back in order and allow this process to move forward. And I believe if we continue to have individuals like Ron Johnson involved, then the right things can happen. But the Ron Johnsons of the world need to be distributed across this nation into police academies, into cities, so this does not happen. And finally, I would say, Michael Brown and his family, we must continue to pray for them. This young man was supposed to start college on Monday. Instead, they're planning for his funeral. He did not deserve to die. He did not deserve to be shot down in the middle of the street like a mad dog. He needs his legacy to be continued to move forward. His killer needs to come to justice, and those who violated the civil rights of individuals, who destroyed property, who falsely arrested and falsely imprisoned people that was exercising their constitutional right, they need to be held accountable, both civilly and criminally, and I look forward to doing my part to help make that happen. And again, Norman Lang, I just appreciate this opportunity to talk to you. If your viewers want to see the type of things I'm interested in besides this, they can go to my website, which is SolomonSimmons.com. That's SolomonSimmons.com. Or I'm on Twitter at Solo Speaks Truth. And I'm just looking forward to continue to monitor this situation and have the next opportunity to talk to you and your wonderful network.
Thank you so much, Demario. I appreciate your time and your expertise and your thoughts on this case. Again, this is Nomaline Gonzalez Moses with Your Black World. And again, if you want to check out Demario, he's at SolomonSimmons.com. And this, again, is Your Black World. Thank you for tuning in.